Ba-da-down, da-da-da-down. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shadoe at Night. This is Wednesday, July the 23rd, 2025. I just received word that our friend Brad Wilder, you can see him, I think it's Wednesday nights, starting around 9 o'clock. He does that show with Mike Voyjakis from Voyage Funeral Homes in Manitoba called Ask the Funeral Director. And Brad had a heart attack today. I do not know his condition. I know this is his second heart attack in the past couple of years. And I wish him all the best in a hopefully speedy recovery. But again, as it stands right now, I do not know his condition. Praying for Brad right now. On the show tonight, day one of the Tamara Lich, Chris Barber sentencing trial. And we've got some coverage of that. Thank you to Right Blend and to Chris Dacey, who've been on top of this, as well as our friend Ray McInnes, who will be on the show tomorrow night. He is the author of this book here. It's called Unjustified, and he's also in Ottawa covering the sentencing hearing. No word from Universal Ostrich Farm or the CFIA or the Appeals Court of Canada just yet on the ruling there, where CFIA wants to cull 400 healthy ostriches. And the David Romaluski trial, well, not the trial, the hearing, is tomorrow in Ottawa. You can go check out Dave Freedom's page for more information on that. We played you the video that Dave made last night. Political prosecution? Yeah, probably. Even Brian Lilley. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not a real big fan of Brian Lilley. I think he's arrogant. But I do believe that he does some good work occasionally, most of the time, actually, from the Toronto Sun and the National Post. And he put out an opinion column on what's going on with this sentencing today. We're going to get to that in just a bit. There's a couple of interesting stories that come from across Canada, notably, man removed from a flight in Nova Scotia, an Air Canada flight, for wearing a Trudeau Blackface t-shirt. That's a true story. Yeah. And Parks Canada has revoked a permit for a MAGA supporting Christian artist at his concert over safety concerns. Plus, Right Blend and Chris Dacey are going to take us. Remember, I've been saying for the past few weeks now that every single downtown and major cities across the country, and even medium-sized cities and small cities across this country, are complete and total toilets. Well, Dacey and Right Blend last night took us through a tour of downtown Ottawa, notably the Byward Market, and you'll see exactly what I was talking about in this video coming up in about 10 or 15 minutes. All right, we'll begin the show in just about 30 seconds. But before we do that, let's say hello to Larry, who's watching from Windsor tonight. Hello, Carla in Calgary. Mo is watching tonight. Stephen is watching tonight from Belleville, Ontario. Hello, Rich in Regina. Kevin is watching tonight. Hillbilly77 is watching on YouTube and says, this guy has such a good radio voice. Well, I spent 35 years doing that, so... It's my voice. There's nothing I can do about this. Hello, Paul, watching in Winnipeg. Sue is watching tonight. Vicky, Dawson, Dallas. By the way, Dallas is a brand new member of the VIP club, the all-access member club at shadoedavis.com. And he's also joined up with the Shadoe at Night community on Telegram, and you should too. Hello, Kev. Judy is watching tonight. Roseanne. Hello, Diane, watching from Regina. Michelle is also in Regina. JY is watching on X in Enola, Manitoba tonight. Eddie is watching up in Stonewall. Wherever you happen to be watching on whatever platform you're watching on, guys, don't forget, like and share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. People need to hear this information. The show begins in 30 seconds. We need to have a Blackface Appreciation Day. Thank you for this, Kevin. where everybody puts on one of those Trudeau t-shirts when half the population of the country. Dad said somebody's going to take notice, most probably Justin. Well, it doesn't matter if Justin takes notice or not because he's irrelevant today. What matters is I wonder if the majority of passengers on that Air Canada flight were wearing Trudeau Blackface t-shirts. They would have thrown them all off because the flight crew was offended. I wonder. I doubt it. They were trying to make an example of this guy. And that's the problem with the left today. Not only do they want to get their own way, they want to make sure that they stick it to you and they show you who's boss. I mean, free speech is not enough for these people, but that's something that's going to be a common thread through tonight's show. Here is Tamara Lich this morning arriving at the courthouse. This was around 8:30 Eastern time.
Like a mistake for Canadians?
Excuse me?
No.
We're not going to be doing any comments.
Okay.
Excuse me?
No, are you?
How are you feeling today?
You feel great, I think.
How are you feeling today?
Tamara. Good morning. How are you? Good today, my dear.
What do you think of the 7-8 year sentence the Crown is looking for?
Of course, Tamara has been instructed by her legal counsel to say nothing to the media, whether it's left-wing corporate media or independent media, as this hearing begins today or began today and continues tomorrow and then again on Friday. Oh, by the way, for those of you who are asking, hey, what about Chris Carbert? Didn't you say you were going to have Chris Carbert on tonight? I said that was possible. Chris messaged me early this morning and said that he's not feeling up to par. He's feeling under the weather. And I said, that's cool, dude, whenever you're ready. Also, please remember, this man has been through purgatory for the last 3.5 years. I'm sure he's still suffering through some kind of shell shock right now, some kind of PTSD. And it's quite possible Chris is a little bit shy as well, and might have some reservations about speaking in front of 2,000 people, 2,000 live viewers, and then the other 25 or 30,000 that pile on later on to watch replays. But we will get Chris on. The other thing is, remember, his situation right now for release is that he's on bail pending his appeal, which begins in the fall. This is not an outright release. So there could be some things that Chris couldn't say, a la Chris and Tamara when they were first out. Remember? There was a lot of things they couldn't do. There was a lot of things they couldn't say. And so rather than going on and pussyfooting around, walking over landmines, they thought, better to just stay away from all that for now, just in case I say the wrong thing. I mean, Tamara showed up at an awards banquet a couple of years ago, and they went and got her. They sent Ottawa police all the way to her house in Medicine Hat to arrest her. Show trial, and they put her on a plane, flew her all the way across the country. Who knows what that cost? They threw her in jail for 49 days. So if Chris Carbert does not want to come on my show based upon that, I completely and totally understand. All those reasons are absolutely valid. However, if he does decide to come on, we'll be absolutely happy and thrilled to have him on. All right, so Right Blend, as usual, was at the Ottawa courthouse today doing some fantastic reporting. Guys, I have to tell you that this X thread is very long. It's like 50 items on this thing. We're going to go all the way through it, and he's very detailed about it. Very detailed about it. So I'll try and make it go as quickly as possible, but I'll also try and be as clear as possible so as you guys get everything here. Remember, Right Blend was in the courthouse today. Number 1 of 50 political prosecution, Right Blend says it's the first day of what's sure to be a multiple-day sentencing hearing for convicted mischief makers and Freedom Convoy trucker protest organizers Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. Follow this thread for my typical detailed reporting from inside the courtroom. Let's clear a few major things up right away. First, today will not be the sentencing in a case as complicated as this, where the trial spanned over 40 days. The sentencing will take some time. And during the sentencing hearing, we'll hear the Crown and the defense teams legally, argue about what punishment Tamara and Chris will get. We'll also get to hear any victim impact statements. And as is required by the criminal code, both Tamara and Chris will be given an opportunity to speak. but they don't have to. The sentencing decision itself won't be until next month at the earliest. Sometimes sentencing happens much faster, probably not this time. Chris Barber is not in Ottawa. Now, the left-wing corporate media made the mistake today of publishing a story that said one of Chris's parents had died, and that's why he was not in the courtroom in person. That is absolutely untrue. Chris posted a video about that earlier today. The lead Crown prosecutor's father died, not Chris's father. So that's why the lead Crown prosecutor was not in the courtroom today. Chris is not there because travel expenses, because he's got work to do. And he's already spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars going back and forth to Ottawa, paying for hotels, paying for gasoline. It's a lot to ask, not to mention the legal fees. So he asked the court a couple of weeks ago if he could attend through Zoom, and he was allowed to do that. So Chris is not in Ottawa for the sentencing. He is appearing remotely from his home in Saskatchewan. His counsel team is in Ottawa, led by the studious Diane Magus and the wonderful Ms. Younes. Both convicted mischief makers had the option to appear remotely. Tamara is in Ottawa in person, looking confident and calm as always. The Crown has submitted an incredible amount of material in an attempt to somehow justify their extremely off-base and heavy-handed sentencing request. Again, 7 years for Tamara, 8 years for Chris. Conservatives, including Pierre Poilievre, have spoken out against the Crown's inappropriate sentencing demand. Shockingly, like I just mentioned, the Crown wants 7 years for Tamara, 8 years for Chris Barber, both convicted of one count of mischief, and then Chris got one for counseling others to disobey a court order. Right Blend says, my jaw would be permanently stuck on the floor if they got the 7 and 8 years. One would think binding authority in the Superior Court of Justice, Ontario's highest trial court, would prevent the judge in this lower court from imposing such a sentence. That's because another convoy organizer, Pat King, was sentenced to a combined 1-year jail sentence, including 9 months of pretrial credit and 3 months house arrest for his 5 convictions versus Chris's 2 and Tamara's 1. As well, from Right Blend's long hours in court for Tamara and Chris's trial, he says he'd be shocked if the judge was leaning towards such a harsh sentence in the first place. The verdict certainly suggests the judge and the Crown are worlds apart on the facts. We're just filing into court now. Thanks, as always, for following. All right, here's that was part 1 of 50. Now, the next parts aren't going to be as long as that one. That was just his introductory preamble. Number 2, before we get started, consider supporting my detailed reporting on this matter. You can send e-transfers. You know, I'm going to give him a plug here. He does a great job. E-transfers to realrightblend@gmail.com. Number 3, the court addressed some housekeeping and other matters. One of the 2 Crown attorneys who have prosecuted this case suffered a sudden death in the family and is unable to attend the sentencing hearing. The judge informed the court. She sent him condolences this morning. Number 4, it should be noted that that for the vast majority of this case, the media bench was extremely thin, except for a single reporter from CBC and one from the Canadian Press and Right Blend, of course. Today, the body of the court is full of supporters and media. Goes on to say maybe a few detractors. The Crown says they aim to be finished by lunch, heavily relying on their written submissions, of which the defense is going to be making most of theirs orally. The judge asked to start with impact statements. The Crown said they won't be reading any into the record, and instead they'll be in their written submissions. Right Blend seemed to be shocked by that. The judge asked if any defense had any issues with anything in the victim impact statements. Magus said no. That's Chris's attorney, Diane Magus. Greenspan, this is Tamara's attorney, said no. Greenspan specifies it wasn't so much about whether they should be before Her Honor, but rather what they would say. The judge remarked that having impact statements where material is not necessarily based on fact available to the public, it could create confusion. 5th part here, the Crown says their job is to represent the public. She says no case has any comparison to the incredible mischief here. The Crown says it acknowledges an extraordinary sentence, but says Lich and Barber are responsible for incredible harm, which is why they're seeking so much jail time. Number 6, the Crown is quoting Hackland on how sentencing about deterrence, and he sentenced King to 1 year for 5 convictions versus 1 and 2 convictions here. Can't wait for the defense. I believe Serranos is the other case. The Crown says that after reviewing their materials, They both anticipate defense will say Tamara and Barber attended with the best intentions, the judge says, and that was your submission, right? And it is, and we anticipate they will say they had the right to protest, and they did from the beginning. The Crown has said this is not about politics, but about the means to protest employed. The protest employed, it is entirely political. The means other people used are some honks and bouncy castles. It's on these grounds the Crown is seeking a deterrent sentence, not the beliefs. We urge your honor when you retire to render your decision that you consider what is an appropriate sentence. Lich and Barber are not being sentenced for a peaceful, lawful protest. It's if that's what Convoy was, we wouldn't be here today. Okay, this is the Crown speaking. We're here today because the Liberal government restricted and abused Canadians who didn't agree with them. This is the defense speaking. Municipalities and provinces criminalized protests for years, and Trudeau, acting more like a scorned king than a leader, denied any communication or redress. The judge stops the court because 2 members of the media have been approved to observe on Zoom, including Alex Zoltan of True North. The judge asks him to turn on his camera and identify himself, and he does. Number 7. We're on recess because of the technical issue that's creating a buzzing noise interfering with the court reporter. Man, this is even more detailed than usual for Right Blend. But while we wait, I want to mention the strange warning given to the court this morning. It was very different from the warnings I've heard so far. And instead of warning explicitly against recording the proceedings, this warning said that racism or other abuse will not be tolerated and the police will be notified. What? It also said observers must be in person. The judge said the warning was changed by the Ontario Court of Justice due to issues in other courts. Not here. I've seen anonymous Zoom observers flood the court, feed with explicit pornographic material and other noisy and disgusting nonsense. I think this is a common tactic in activist circles when their comrades are in court, so I'm not surprised to see Ontario crack down on Zoom court abuse if they follow through. Justice Perkins McVeigh has not permitted the public to observe on Zoom for the long duration of this trial. Wise choice, Right Blend thinks. We're back. Number 8. The Crown rises to say, as she said, they encourage Her Honor to consider an appropriate sentence, remain cognizant that Barber and Lich are not being sentenced for peaceful legal protest, but criminal offenses. 1 for Lich, 2 for Barber, a mass mischief that impacted Ottawa, and for Barber, additionally counseling disobeying a court order. She says, although the convoy was not violent, it was not peaceful. This is the same protest where Justice Mosley in Canadian Frontline Nurses remarked, went beyond legal protest and represented an unacceptable breakdown of public order. He also said the Emergencies Act and freezing bank accounts was ultra vires, illegal. Ultra vires is a Latin term for overreach, basically. And the Crown mentions it's being appealed, LOL. The Crown says that even a good intention is not a mitigating factor. The judge says it is a contextual factor. The Crown responds with case law running in circles to justify the madness. Right Blind says in number 9, I believe the Crown agreed that Chris and Tamara had noble intentions in regards to the above exchange. Crown quotes a case where a man who was accused of vigilante justice is not justified with noble intentions. This has nothing to do with it. Case reference McLaughlin goes on to say non-deterrence will result in people taking law into their own hands. Crown again says Convoy was not a peaceful protest in the conventional sense. She's repeating this over and over for media sound bites, and that Lich and Barber had a great part in encouraging the protest to continue and having it come together, and their actions were deliberate and sustained. What makes the Freedom Convoy different than Coots or Windsor, as Your Honor asked? Right Blend says, I didn't ask it quite that way. What makes this qualitatively different is the disruption. It went on for weeks, and so did Coots, by the way. And the unprecedented government response. States of emergency were declared. Emergencies Act declared for the first time in history. The government having a fit does not mean the protesters were in the wrong, and the EA was again ultra vires. Again, that is overreach. It's illegal. Justice Perkins McVeigh said there was a point, a line had been crossed. When it was put in writing for the first time, what it meant, February 4th text with Bach. The Crown goes on and references the letter sent to Lich, the good faith agreement attempt. If they all went home, At that point, we probably wouldn't be here. Major slip up, Right Blend says. They would have prosecuted it whether it was day 1 or 3 weeks, sorry, 1 day or 3 weeks. Judge, what makes it complicated is there was a good faith attempt to shrink the footprint, and all of the witnesses indicated it wasn't the fault of protesters. It did not go to plan. Crown says the agreement wasn't the official saying the protest was okay. Judge says it was one of the reasons they found them guilty, but would be considered. That's today. The Crown goes on to say that it's a mitigating factor and limited the harm, but not eliminating the harm. Right, time served, an attempt by the police and the city to mitigate an ongoing mischief, and should be seen as some mitigation to Lich and Barber is trying to work with police, but offset by comments by Barber. Nowhere in text messages or anywhere did anyone say everybody go home. Number 11, the Crown said Her Honor found protesters created a mass mischief and that Lich and Barber were leaders of the large group. The judge said she found others were separate. The Crown keeps going, financial organizing, etc. It would be impossible for Lich and Barber not to know what was happening. The judge says she didn't make a finding that they were able to know everything that was going on. No evidence they knew of the desecration of the church or war memorial. There was no desecration. What church? What? No, there was no desecration. I can't believe they actually threw that into the court. That's incredible. Mr. Barber was upset after finding out about the war memorial. Crown responds, this all occurred in context of the protest. The judge says there was evidence they knew what was happening at large. They did not condone the discretion of the memorial or others. The Crown, more or less ignoring that, says they advocated against violence. The judge and Hackland found in King Crown that it was mitigating, but at the same time, they were party to the mischief impacting businesses, whether or not they knew everything happening. So how does that make them guilty if they knew about it? And the government of Canada systemically abused citizens who disagreed with them for years. The Crown wants the judge to remember that the rules made by police were not followed by truckers. She mentions food stations, noise, fumes, disruption to transportation and public streets. Your Honor found significant interference with the use and enjoyment of property. What else? The mischief in this case resulted in states of emergency and the Emergencies Act and the 3-day jurisdictional police action to restore public order. And again, that was declared illegal, the Emergencies Act, by the Federal Court of Canada. This is evidence of the government squashing dissent, not of protest or wrongdoing, by the way. The Crown, now we're on number 13. The Crown is submitted to the Public Order Emergency Commission report and the institutional report from the OPS. For the purpose of the cause, the city reported a total of $7 million in cost because of the convoy, and the Ottawa police reported a cost in excess of $55 million for policing the convoy. Your Honor will see in some victim impact statements cost estimates of losses. The Crown is not saying Ms. Lich and Mr. Barber are responsible for every single dollar, but the scope. It cost tens of millions of dollars. The people who relied on services, businesses, and the cost of policing, it's a significant cost. The cost to unvaccinated Canadians was far greater, Right Blend goes on to say. And victim and community impact statements, Vivian Lear, who also testified the feces she found, which was most likely a homeless person, and that she's still scared when she sees a pickup truck or flags on cars. There was laughter in the court. The Chateau Laurier and Lord Elgin submitted estimates of losses. The Chateau Laurier was making huge money off all the police staying there and living there. The judge asks if they were open before. The Crown didn't clearly answer, but instead they had started, but then had to shut down, and they had issues with deliveries due to police closures and had issues with people not following health mandates. The crowd goes on to talk about the shelters that were affected during the protest, including the Shepherds of Good Hope, and how their clients and staff felt unsafe and unable to access services, and that the noise worsened talked health conditions. The homeless were well taken care of during the convoy. Everybody was fed, and they were given hand warmers, etc. The Crown talks about business issues due to political blockades. The Crown said they weren't going to read impact statements. Again, they submitted them in writing. Number 14, now a claim of how the whole city felt under siege. Right Blend lives there. He says, I didn't feel under siege. I felt liberated, represented. Crown says even though the protest was largely nonviolent, changing her words earlier, she said it was nonviolent without a qualifier. It doesn't mean It didn't create an environment of fear for some. Of course, the media was running hysterical nonsense to scare people and try to make the protest out to be something it wasn't, for daring to stand up to the government narrative. Jumping to an Alberta decision, quoting the Serrano's case. Again, he's not clear on that, but he thinks it's the Serrano's case, that the rule of law is based on majority of people. Until the law is changed, it must be obeyed. The Crown submits Lich and Barber being found guilty seriously threatens the rule of law. The judge says, I think I went into that in my decision. There's balancing. Yes, Crown says what started as one thing went to protesters deciding they didn't need to follow the law to effect change, and that Lich and Barber's roles are much greater than other protest cases. Those cases can be instructive. In fact, they're binding. In the case of Patrick King, the protest was a breakdown of public order and an interference of the right to use and enjoy property. Number 15, the Crown says Patrick King was sentenced to 3 months of a conditional sentence in addition to 9 months of pretrial custody credit, in addition to his remorse. There are some similarities, but some differences. They're trying to avoid this, and that King was on the periphery of leadership, and people downtown didn't know King. Oh, come on, give me a break, the people downtown. Did you see his videos? Did you see his videos during the convoy? Everybody knew Pat King, probably more so than Tamara or Chris. I can't believe that the Crown could actually submit this as any kind of evidence in this court. That's absolutely wrong. Justice Perkins McVeigh says we have TikTok videos of people approaching, but not much else. Greenspan did ask Blonde or Bach if they encountered any protesters, if they were here because of Barber or Lich. They did not. Crown says the judge also made finding of Barber's celebrity. Right Blend says, I did not. That's why this case is so complicated. Mr. Arpin found Barber and Lich leader of broad moderates. Judge, we don't know that. Officer Sear talked about speaking with others. The Crown says the mayor's office confirmed Lich and Barber were the ones with who they engaged. PLT, Parliamentary Police, I believe, did not deal with King. In fact, they did deal with him, and dealing with PLT is evidence of being collaborative and trying to follow the law. It's not a point against Barber or Lich. The judge says King and this case are different. The Crown says there will be some differences and some similarities. King was convicted of more than both Lich and Barber combined. The Crown says that in Canada, disagreement with the government must be expressed lawfully, and when protest crosses the line into criminality, those responsible must be held accountable, except in the case of the pro-Palestinians who constantly have charges dropped or are not charged at all. There's a lot of editorializing going on in this, and I totally appreciate that. This is about the prolonged takeover of the capital city. Takeover. There are mitigating factors, the Crown says, but pales in comparison to the harm. It's not a sentence the Crown is seeking lightly, but because of the harm and the subversion of law between January and February 2022, this is what they're going after. The Crown finishes their submissions, but will respond to the defense. Okay, so now we have first Chris Barber's lawyer, Diane Magus, getting up. She says the Crown's last sentence, not a sentence sought lightly, but proportionate to the crime. This is a request that is harsh, disproportionate, and constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. To ask for 8 years for Chris Barber, especially considering the sentence of Patrick King and Farfadas, and considering the case law with respect to the G20 summit. When the Crown says this is the worst case of mischief, that's not true. The G20 was a case of mischief where there were millions of dollars of property damage and people were in fear and no one came anywhere near a penitentiary sentence. Magus references a political anarchist who damaged police cars. The judge said this is what she would call old school mischief, where property is damaged, where they took the mischief to the next level, which is much more serious in regards to the actions and effects. The defendant in this case participated in Black Bloc. This is the G20 protest in Toronto years ago, to remove security fencing separating what he said was elite politicians and everyone else. Magus argued it was political. It was much more severe mischief, old school mischief. What's the difference? I don't think the criminal code has changed. Magus argues the G20 was much more severe in impact, even for people as victims of the mischief. There was an impact on the community. Then TPS, Toronto Police Service Chief Bill Blair, submitted a letter saying that the police were attacked and law-abiding citizens had their property attacked and stolen. MAGA says that even when considering deterrence in the case of G20, where there were millions of dollars of physical damage, the court did not sentence anyone close to what the Crown is asking for here. In Henry, the accused was disguised and did not come with good intentions. It's already been acknowledged by the judge in this case that Chris Barber and Tamara Lich arrived in Ottawa with good intentions. As the Crown and the court have found, Barber came with noble intentions. Your Honor found the line was crossed to mischief. It was part of civil disobedience. His identity was not concealed. He came with good intentions. Another G20 case where a man sentenced, blah, 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 blah. MAGA said, again, it's in the context of a protest. Judge says the facts are different. MAGA says much more severe if you read the impacts of the community. Many around me had fear on their faces, people screaming, hiding in the back of the hall. In my submission, the impact on the community in the G20 situation much more severe than in this case and much more severe than Chris Barber. He's not responsible for everything. The judge says we won't have evidence like this, or we don't have evidence like this. MAGA says some of the impacts, things suggest things like this happened, and they did not in this nonviolent protest. Judge says, we did hear some persons suggest they were intimidated by some persons, not suggesting Lich and Barber were involved. MAGA says people came to Ottawa in unprecedented circumstances. People were cheering on the sides of highways all across the country, feeling liberated by the convoy because of the COVID response abuse. To many people, Chris Barber was a hero standing up to the anarchy of government. Judge humorously injects, maybe call it perceived overreach, not sure if it's anarchy. MAGA says Barber has many cards written from back in 2022 where people thanked him as a hero. Piles of them. Magus expands that the Crown was confused. Why did they come to Ottawa? Because that's where they have to do it. That's where protests happen in the capital city of the country. They were protesting federal mandates. Next section. Magus suggested Inspector Lucas understood that's why the protest came to Ottawa, specifically wanted to be on Wellington. The judge interjects that she took him to mean it comes with the territory. Magus reminds the court the context of the support must be considered as well. Magus continues with mastery and goes on with the differences between other, more severe mischief versus the convoy, and that Barber cannot be held responsible for everything everyone might have or anyone might have done, but he was convicted of. The judge explains that's where the difficulty is. No case exactly like this one. Patrick King, very similar. In other convoy cases, someone arrested and convicted for sitting in a street or having a gas tank, MAGA said it would invite an error of law to apply the Crown's request. The judge says it's much more easy to evaluate mischief when damage is done with something like a stick, Magus, or to a window. This is much more nebulous. Magus again compares mischief and property damage cases. Mischiefs like the G20 versus someone feeling like they can't leave their house for a few days, despite many people doing that fine. Magus counters the claim of police cost by saying the OPS said pro-Palestine protests, which are assumed to be mostly lawful. Judge says, I believe some were arrested. Those charges were mostly dropped, cost $19 million. Last year, protests are expensive. Justice Perkins McVeigh states the costs provided by the Crown are not for exact purposes, but for an idea of the scope of the situation. The Crown agrees. The judge then wonders how much Canada Day costs, or the cost, when the Pat King case came down. Sounds like the judge won't be considering line item policing costs in this sentencing, which are much less concrete than costs from rioting, like at the G20, which were mischief cases. As the judge said, we don't have that evidence here. So this goes on and on and on. The summation, you guys, for today, according to Right Blend, is that Chris Barber's attorney kicked ass and the Crown faltered badly. This is day one of 3 days of sentencing hearings for Chris Barber and Tamara Lich in Ottawa. Now, Tamara's lawyer did speak briefly this afternoon. He will speak more tomorrow morning. That's Mr. Greenspan. And then the judge will ask both counsels questions tomorrow afternoon and on Friday morning. And then it should be It should be over with. And then the judge will go away for a few weeks and come back with what she believes are fair sentences. Again, we'll have Ray McInnes, the author of Unjustified, who is in Ottawa covering these proceedings. He'll be on the show tomorrow night. In the meantime, our friend Alexa Lavoie of Rebel News was out interviewing people in the streets of Ottawa today and asking them about the Freedom Convoy. And here are some of the answers she got.
Quickly, like, what did you think about the Freedom Convoy 2022?
The Freedom
Convoy. Yeah, what did you think of it?
It's kind of late in the day to be asking.
I know.
It was a problem.
Yeah.
Can you? I live around here. It was a problem. I had a lot of threats from people yelling at me for wearing a mask, people coming over in front of my house, ringing bells, yelling freedom, 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 interfering with conversations with neighbors, because I live across from where they were staying. Mm-hmm. So it was intrusive and it was unnecessary. I don't think they accomplished anything. Mm-hmm. I think they were more of a laughing stock at the end. I think they've shown themselves for what they are. Also, I think the people who are the leaders were not just leaders of that group. I think initially they were anti-immigration. They were gun lobbyists. They belonged to a different group than the one they portrayed themselves as being part of here. Mm-hmm. And they hid behind the Freedom Convoy, I think, in order to pass on their views about, well, they're racists, mm-hmm. you know, and nobody brought that up as much, but there was a lot of racism going on up there near Parliament, and people of color were being harassed and
my God,
and called names. And this had nothing to do with freedom, as they call it.
No, they weren't.
I think
that never happened.
I think it's just that group was kind of like.
You see, guys, this is a woman who has been poisoned by the left-wing corporate media, and she's a repeater. She 100% never went down to the Freedom Guy. She says, I was harassed, people yelling freedom, freedom. I'll guarantee you she never went down there and talked to people herself, and probably never heard anybody being harassed because of the color of their skin.
White supremacists.
Mm-hmm. Can I just ask quickly, what did you think of the Freedom Convoy?
I think it was horrendous, right? I mean, these were terrorists causing grief
to
all of the residents of Ottawa. Frankly, embarrassing Canadians like ourselves, embarrassing Albertans like ourselves. I wish they never did that, and I really do hope that they get what they deserve in court. I think it was ridiculous. Yeah.
Crown is asking 8 years. Do you think it's
so
enough?
Those are my. I think whatever the Crown asks for, the judicial system should be allowed to run. I think it's absolutely ridiculous when politicians, like Trump is doing in the U.S., right, firing people in the judicial system.
Okay, so here's a guy clearly suffering from a case of Trump derangement syndrome, right? So he thinks anybody who thinks Trump's policies are good is bad. Anybody who believes in common sense or rights, whatever rights they happen to be, is bad. That's what this guy thinks. But he doesn't know he thinks that. He actually believes he's on the side of justice. And that's the problem. Delusional.
It's unacceptable. So Poilievre and his, some of the, well, Poilievre, first of all, not even as an MP right now, making comments that are contrary to what the judicial system is trying to do, completely inappropriate. We don't need politicians. They shouldn't be above the law. They shouldn't have any jurisdiction over the law. And you have to let the Crown prosecutors do their job. They're the experts in this. But like I said, terrorists deserve to go to jail, and I hope they do get a substantial sentence. We'll see what the judge gives.
That's unbelievable. Oh, by the way, several conservative MPs have spoken out about this injustice being played out in the court system right now. And the Liberals, the lefties on the other side, they're screaming and yelling that, oh, they shouldn't be influencing the justice system. Well, first of all, they're only elected officials, and they're allowed to have their opinion publicly or otherwise. And they're the opposition. They have no sway or power over the justice system. Remember when Justin Trudeau tried to influence the SNC Lavalin case? He actually tried and was found guilty of political interference in an ongoing court case that involved SNC Lavalin. Got a slap on the wrist for it. You don't hear liberals screaming and yelling about that, do you? Here's Brian Lilly talking about Freedom Convoy from the Toronto Sun.
Wednesday, Tamara Lich and Chris Barber are going to start the sentencing hearings for their conviction of mischief as it relates to the Freedom Convoy. You might recall Lich and Barber were two of the organizers of the convoy that rolled into Ottawa at the end of January in 2022. It rocked the nation's capital for 3 weeks and eventually ended with the Emergencies Act being invoked, with police dragging folks off, and with Barber and Lich being charged and then eventually convicted with mischief. That's it, mischief. But the Crown in this case has put forward sentencing recommendations of 7 years for Lich and 8 years for Barber. If you didn't think that this was already a politically motivated prosecution, well, think again. Now, I have to point out that nobody gets 7 and 8 years for mischief. This is a ridiculous request by the Crown Attorney's Office that wouldn't be going forward without the permission or perhaps even the encouragement, maybe the demand of Crown Attorney Dallas Mack. He's not the lead on this case, but this wouldn't happen without his approval, which makes this even more politicized. It drags the system of justice into disrepute when you put forward recommendations like this. Let's hope that Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh, the woman who oversaw the trial and said, no, they're not really guilty of these other crimes, just mischief, looks forward and says, no, that's a ridiculous sentencing recommendation. You can loathe the Freedom Convoy all you want, but we can't have a justice system where sentences are handed out based on anger. You know, look, I get angry at some of these sentences that are handed out for heinous crimes, and they're lighter than this. Are we really going to start sentencing people to mischief, to time in jail for multiple years with a sentence that's harsher than what we give for heinous crimes? Seems some people would like that, including the Crown Attorney in Ottawa, who perhaps should consider retirement or running for office if he wants to be this political. But Justice Perkins McVeigh needs to look at the facts, consider what is before her, and ultimately say, you know what, 49 days in jail already for Lich, a 45-day trial, 2-day sentencing hearing, and years of their lives, plus the untold cost to taxpayers of millions upon millions of dollars for this prosecution, that's probably enough. This doesn't deserve to go any further, and it's time all of us moved on.
Well, I don't know about moving on just yet. There's still a whole bunch of things to be resolved, but this is clearly a case of political persecution. Speaking of persecution, this is very interesting. You guys remember Eva Chipiuk, right?
On the first day of this public order emergency inquiry, Commissioner Rouleau, you said uncovering the truth is an important goal. When difficult events occurred that impact the lives of Canadians, the public has the right to know what happened. Certes, l'objectif de l'enquête publique.
So the call of this public inquiry is to shed a light on the situation which occurred and to make recommendations so that this situation will not occur again.
Be the starting point for all Canadians. And that means all Canadians, including government leaders, to hold the executive branch of Canada to account. If there ever was a time for a Prime Minister to step down, now is that time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You do remember she was the attorney who asked Justin Trudeau when he became so afraid of the citizens of this country. Well, today, what happened to Eva, and this is very interesting. She posted this up on X. Well, I wasn't expecting this at RBC. This is the Royal Bank of Canada. Welcome to Canada, where tyranny has great customer service. She's actually got a very good sense of humor. And she goes on to say here, this is a letter she got from RBC last week, and it says, as a federally regulated financial institution, RBC is required by law to comply with applicable legislation. These laws require that we implement certain processes and procedures which directly support the formulation of RBC's positions with respect to risk. After careful consideration, we regretfully advise you, Eva Chipiuk, that the recent activity in your accounts, and I asked Eva about this, she said, yeah, I moved some money from one account to another. That's it. That was the recent activity in your accounts is outside of RBC's client risk appetite. And consequently, we're no longer in a position to continue our banking relationship with you. Keeping in mind that all of the 5 major banks in this country, own a part of each other. That means good luck getting a bank account at CIBC or BMO, Scotiabank, any of them. Now, she did land on her feet in this situation. Bow Valley Credit Union came to the rescue. Thank you, you guys, for doing your jobs. I mean, when they debank you, how are you actually supposed to live in this system? And we're all going to have to face this at some point going forward when they try to bring in these CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies. They're not going to be doing that in the United States because of the law that they passed last week. Remember, that's a central bank digital currency, not a cryptocurrency that Donald Trump seems to be all over with his buddies from Palantir. But that's a different story for a different show. The bottom line is Canada will most likely, and Mark Carney has been pushing this for quite some time, Canada in the next couple of years will be going to a digital currency. I don't know what problem this is going to solve, but they probably will. The Bank of Canada will be going to a digital currency, a CBDC. That means they'll be able to shut off your money when you don't play like a good boy or girl inside of their system. So like I say, we're going to have to find ways to live outside this system because we use banks for everything. Pay everything. Comes from your bank account, right? Your rent, your mortgage, your bills, all of that stuff. And without a bank account, what are you going to do? There's a guy in the United States who's been living off grid for quite some time, who's got a very large following on social media. I'm going to have to try and get him on the show so he can explain how he does it, because he seems to be okay. I don't know exactly how. Yesterday, I told you that conservatives are compromised, just like the Liberal Party. I didn't say they were as bad as the Liberal Party. I maintain that. Remember, during the election campaign, I was telling you that the Liberals are 100% compromised. The NDP is 100% compromised. The Conservatives might be 30 to 40% compromised. And I believe there are still some good Conservative MPs. People like Leslyn Lewis, for example, who posted this on her X account not so long ago. I think this was today or yesterday. This past weekend, the deadline passed for Canada to reject the World Health Organization amendments to the international health regulations. Canada did not reject these binding regulations, which would grant power to the World Health Organization to influence Canada's public health response during global health crises. Not only did Canada fail to reject these amendments, there was also no parliamentary discussion surrounding these changes, which have potential implications for our national sovereignty and our ability to respond as we see fit in times of crisis. Countries like the United States and Italy have rejected these amendments to protest their national sovereignty. Canada, however, has doubled down. Canada has not only accepted these bidding regulations, but also appointed an interim chief public health officer, Dr. Howard Njoo, who is the vice chair of the World Health Organization Pandemic Influenza Preparedness Framework Advisory Group. Canadians deserve a government that cares about protecting our national sovereignty. Unelected international bureaucrats do not know better than Canadians and should not have authority over how Canada governs. So would you say that Dr. Leslyn Lewis, and she ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party a couple of times, didn't win? I wonder why that is. Because the powers that be did not want her to win, probably. Would you say that Dr. Leslyn Lewis is a good member of the Conservative Party? She actually understands what's going on and she speaks out about it? I would say yes. I would say definitely yes. How about this guy, Glenn Motz, another Conservative MP who spoke in regards to the Freedom Convoy in the spring of 2024?
Their livelihoods and a violation of their rights. And for them, enough was enough. They gathered from across Canada and came to Ottawa and other locations to voice their frustrations but also to be heard by this government. And I think it's important to understand that this government had no interest in listening to them. And I know that firsthand. I personally vigorously worked behind the scenes to arrange meetings between then Minister El Gabra, Minister of Transportation, then Minister of Public Safety, Marco Mendocino, to meet with protest organizer Tamara Lich, with the understanding that such a conversation would result in the protest being dismantled. However, all attempts to make that happen personally with them, whether even on a phone call, they refused to do that. The government completely refused, and I think, quite honestly, that their unwillingness to dialogue from the very beginning, had they changed their attitude, they would have certainly, this situation would have been certainly a totally different, and it could have been avoided. The Prime Minister also added to this. He seemed to be fine stoking division, calling people names, allowing frustrations to grow and tensions to grow until a point where he and his cabinet decided to take their overreach and disregard for charter rights to the next level by stepping outside of the law and their lawful authority and invoking the Emergencies Act for the first time in history.
So that's Conservative MP Glenn Motz. I'm sorry, that was not the spring of 2024. That was February. That was winter 2024. But there he is speaking out and telling the actual truth about Freedom Convoy, and the Liberal government completely ignoring requests from organizers to sit down and have a conversation. Instead, they chose to dig their heels in and then invoke the Emergencies Act. And what about this legendary piece? This is from when Parliament was still virtual during the COVID response. MP Colin Carey, remotely in the House of Commons, asking about the comments of then World Economic Forum chairman Klaus Schwab. You remember what happened? Watch this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I listened to my colleague's speech. I had a constituent that wanted me to ask a question about outside interference to our democracy. Klaus Schwab is the head of the World Economic Forum, and he bragged how his subversive WEF, World Economic Forum, has, quoted, infiltrated governments around the world. He said that his organization had penetrated more than half of Canada's cabinet. And I was wondering, in the interest of transparency, could the member please name which cabinet ministers are on board with the WEF's agenda? My concern is the deputy.
Order. I know he was. I know that the member was in a really good question there, but the audio is really bad, and the video is really bad as well.
What? The audio was bad. Video was bad. Well, I didn't see him, but I could sure hear him fine.
And I apologize. I don't know if the member. Okay, let's try again. The honorable.
One more thing about Freedom Convoy here. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow night, but Fox News was down there during Convoy. So late January and February of 2022, and they were talking to people. Why are you here? Watch what this guy had to say.
You're here, sir.
I'm a 60-year-old grandfather who's been fired from his job by General Motors of Canada on December 12th. They told all non-vax people to just leave. They've cut us all out. My 31-year-old son has lost his job. He will be in April. He's been told he's gone because he's not vaxxed. And my daughter, who was pregnant in the fall and being asked to vax, had to leave early and give birth to a child prematurely after the government was harassing her to take the vaccine. So my family has been impacted in hundreds of thousands of dollars. My son-in-law has his own business, consulting business, and he's losing tens of thousands of dollars. The government has decided to punish their people, and I'm here to stop it.
You feel very passionate about this.
I will die to protect my family and my children from overreach by the government. I'm here for peace, for love, and satisfaction of people living in a country in unity. And this Mr. Trudeau does not deserve the title of Prime Minister. He is an insult to Canadians. I just want to know how far Mr. Trudeau would go if somebody took the food off of his table, because that's how far I'm going to go, Mr. Trudeau. Mark my words, Mr. Trudeau.
Sir, I appreciate very much you sharing your story. I can see your, I can see the emotion.
Thank you.
No one could say it better, perhaps, in terms of a spokesman for this group. And that's just a guy I walked up to. I hadn't talked to him before. That's what we're seeing out here.
Right. So, a lot of the lefties, the ones who were getting paid by the government to stay home, right? They said that, well, a lot of the protesters here, they're angry. Well, of course they are. That's why they're there. Because the food is being taken off their tables, the tables of their families, their jobs are being taken away from them, their businesses are being called non-essential and shut down. And then they're given a pittance by the government to try their best to keep the lights on. How many businesses closed down during that COVID response? And truckers couldn't cross the border if they were unjabbed. That's why they were there. Would you drive all the way to Ottawa from Nova Scotia or British Columbia, Alberta, if you weren't pissed off enough to do it? Of course you wouldn't. We may have to get to those levels of anger again at some point if this government continues on with what they're doing. And getting back to the Conservatives for a second, the ones that I talked about earlier, Leslyn Lewis, Glenn Motz, Colin Carey, they may be good MPs within the Conservative Party, but they're not high-ranking enough within the party to affect change. I think Leslyn Lewis is probably the highest ranking of all three of those people. I'm not even sure if Colin and Glenn are still MPs. Leslyn Lewis is. Now, the people running that party, whoever they happen to be behind closed doors, and many people think it's Stephen Harper, who may have agreed with whichever cabal is running the show up top to stand aside during that election, lose intentionally, and tell Pierre, you know what, Pierre? The cabal chose you to be the prime minister, and the polls all said it, but then they thought, maybe we don't trust this guy enough. We're going to bring in our own guy. We're going to bring in Mark Carney. And Pierre Poilievre was told to lose the election or else. And he said yes. That's what I think. Because there's no way in hell that the Conservatives should have lost that election, even with Mark Carney as the new leader of the Liberal Party, considering the fact that nobody knew who he was. The average normie, Mark Carney? I don't know who that is. There's no way. There's still something incredibly fishy about that whole thing. And then, of course, people talk about the election interference and the recounts and the close calls and whatnot. They didn't manage to give themselves a majority, but they came very, very close. So yesterday, I was talking about the downtowns in major cities in our country being absolute toilets. Talk about Winnipeg. You talk about Victoria, the capital city of British Columbia. Calgary, I don't think is quite so bad yet. Edmonton is a little bit different. Crime is high there. Saskatoon and Regina. Regina probably more so than Saskatoon. It's always been like that, though. Toronto, who knows what the hell is going to happen. Montreal, well, actually got a video from Montreal here. Let me play this for you. Here it is. Now, this is a bunch of Muslims deciding to take over the streets outside of a Montreal cathedral and start praying right there. And I don't think this was by accident. Watch this. Church does the right thing and starts ringing their bells loudly. In an attempt at spiritual dominance, the poster of that video says. I can't say I disagree with that. What about Ottawa, capital city? Chris Dacey of Dacey Media is always down there filming these Palestinian protests. It seems they happen every single weekend. Well, last night, he and Right Blend were out in downtown Ottawa, specifically the Byward Market, which is maybe about a half a mile away from Parliament Hill. Chateau Laurier is right there. It's a hugely popular tourist spot in downtown Ottawa. And this is what they saw last night.
saw a crack pipe masked by that group. This is just something else.
He's coming. He's chasing us down the street. Relax, man. It's all good. Relax, man. It's all good. We're good, man. It's all good. Have a good night. Relax, man. John, watch your back. John, watch your back.
Wow. What do you think of that, Chris?
I think that's indicative of the byward market now. There's
we're on Rideau right here, next to Rideau Center. People openly doing hard drugs, having mental breakdowns. It's a mess. How does Safe Supply help any of these people?
And I don't know what you do. Like, so you want to try to share what's going on here. You get attacked if you try to do it.
Yeah, man, it's crazy.
I don't know what happens if.
It's a crazy place down here on Rideau, man. We've been walking for like a minute, and I saw some guy pass a crack pipe or a meth pipe. I saw all that stuff at the bus shelter, and then this other guy like way out of it. And there's people all over on both sides of us right now.
Well, and this is supposed to be an area. There's a community police station, like basically right where we are.
Like 2 kilometers right now from the Parliament of Canada.
Yeah,
not even 2 kilometers. Like someone said in one of your videos once, like show how close it is to Parliament Hill.
Yes,
it's literally just down this way.
We'll do
like
a flip shot in a second. It's just up over the hill.
It's insane.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Have a good evening.
Spare some change to feed
for feeding her and her baby.
What Canada is in trouble, folks. And if you don't agree, if you try to lie about it, you come walk down here. Come bring your family down here and see what it's like, because this is not okay.
Yeah.
This is not okay.
And this is and you know, over the last weeks, the police have said.
And look at the look on their faces. It's a combination of worry, disgust, disappointment, and fear. A little bit of fear in there. And I don't blame them.
They will be in this area cracking down on disorderly behavior, open drug use. Things look about par for the course.
We are so close. We're just about at Rideau and Sussex.
Yeah, we'll flip it around.
1 kilometer down the road is Parliament Hill, the center of our nation's power.
We'll find people sleeping in every doorway along here, open drug use.
It's insane.
So Rideau Center. More open drug use to my right. And just up here, over that hill.
Look at this right here. Isn't that nice?
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, Ottawa's in great shape, guys.
Yeah.
It's in great shape, yeah.
The smashed out windows. The Tim Hortons cannot be open. It can only open from a window.
Rideau right here at McDonald's that they had to shut down because of having hundreds of police calls every year. This is just chaos. It's chaos.
Yeah, and this is one of the busiest, most like visible areas, right? This is just a little taste of one block here of downtown Ottawa. It gets worse. It's not even late. It's like
9:54 at night, man. On Tuesday, it's a Tuesday night.
Yeah, it's not
insane.
Yeah, the community police station I was talking about. It appears to be closed. No officers anywhere in sight. That's where we just came from. Parliament Hill, a mile up the hill. Not even. You can hear screaming in the distance.
You know, I would do the same thing for a downtown Winnipeg video, but it's way worse than that. Way worse than that. It's terrifying, actually. Canada's become an absolute clown show, a horror story. It's incredible. Story from Juno News here. Man removed from flight for wearing a Trudeau Blackface shirt. Nova Scotia man removed from an Air Canada flight for wearing a shirt that featured an image of Justin Trudeau in blackface, which the cabin crew found to be offensive. Find that on Juno News on Substack. Also, from Western Standard, Parks Canada revokes permit for MAGA supporting Christian artists concert over safety concerns. Of course, sure, it was safety concerns. We're going to go a little long tonight. I hope you guys don't mind. In the extension tonight, for you all-access Nighthawks at shadoedavis.com and members of the Shadoe at Night community on Telegram, we have a whistleblower who claims that she was molested by Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, and by President DJT. So perhaps that's why all of this stuff is coming out now regarding the Russia hoax and President Obama. That could be a smokescreen. Huge distraction from Donald Trump being in the Epstein files. So that's what you're going to be seeing in the extension tonight. An American Christian artist will not perform at a historic Nova Scotia fort after Parks Canada canceled the event permit late last night. Sean Vogt, a Christian artist linked to the MAGA movement, was scheduled for a concert last night at York Redoubt National Historic Site near Halifax. Parks Canada stated it revoked the organizer's permit because of evolving safety and security considerations. The agency explained the decision followed a review of planned protests, advice from police, and concerns about managing crowds safely at the old fort site. So if Antifa goes ahead and publicizes, we're going to be there and we're going to tear it down, then Parks Canada says, you know what? So all they have to do is make a threat, Antifa, and that's it. You can't go out, Christians, and have a good time. York Redoubt was built in 1793 to guard Halifax Harbor. After careful review and due to heightened public safety concerns, Parks Canada's notified the organizer the permit's been revoked. They said that in a statement just after 11 p.m. Atlantic time last night. Here's our favorite truth seeker, Tiana, telling us what she says to Americans when they ask her, what's it like to be Canadian living in Canada?
They asked me to describe Canadians in a nutshell, and I basically said, imagine the government comes onto the news and tells you to eat dog shit. Like, don't use bags anymore, just incorporate dog shit and cat shit into your diet. And then the CBC runs a news article about how amazing dog shit is. And then Vancouver and Montreal open up a restaurant called Poutine. And then a bunch of people go online filming themselves eat cat shit. And then if you question the narrative, you get called a racist, a homophobe, anti-science, whatever, anti-blah, blah, blah. You know all the names that we get called. And then you question your own sanity because you're literally living in an open-air insane asylum with a bunch of crazies run by lunatics called the Canadian government. So yeah, that's pretty much what it's like being Canadian.
I enjoy her stuff so much. We're going to have her back on pretty soon, right? She's funny, and she makes so much sense. Remember last night I was telling you the story about Bridgette Macron and the court case that's going on over there in France regarding these two women, one a psychic and one a podcaster, calling her a man? Well, Candace Owens did the same thing. She's been on fire lately, Candace has. And now the French president is suing Candace Owens over claims France's first lady was born a man. So the focus has shifted from these two women in France to Candace Owens now. They're not going to have any chance of winning this lawsuit. They're not going to have any chance. French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Bridgette filed a defamation lawsuit in the U.S. today against right-wing influencer Candace Owens, centered on her claim that France's first lady is male. The Macron said, "What? You know what? If they're in such support of this trans nonsense, why doesn't they just laugh it off and say, there wouldn't be anything wrong with that?" But no, she's not. Why are they taking it so seriously? Why are they so offended by this? The Macron said in a lawsuit filed in Delaware Superior Court that Owens has waged a lie-filled campaign of global humiliation. How is it humiliation if you support the trans nonsense? Just laugh off the joke. Methinks thou protest too much. It's also, they call it relentless bullying to promote her podcast and expand her frenzied fan base. Yeah, millions of frenzied people out there, millions of them. The Macron said the lies included that Bridgette Macron, 72, I think she's like over 30 years older than him, And apparently, some people say his father, Emmanuel, I am your father. He was born under the name Jean-Michel Trogneau, the actual name of her older brother. Every time the Macrons leave their home, they do so knowing that countless people have heard and many believe these vile fabrications. Again, why are they vile if you support this lifestyle? You celebrate it, you promote it. It's invasive, dehumanizing, and deeply unjust, the complaint said. Owens did not immediately respond to emailed requests for comment. Macron's office declined comment as well. The 22-count complaint seeks an unspecified amount of compensatory and punitive damages. Wednesday's lawsuit is a rare case of a world leader suing for defamation. Donald Trump has filed multiple defamation lawsuits, including against the publisher of the Wall Street Journal last week. To prevail in U.S. defamation cases, public figures like Macron and Trump must show defendants engaged in actual malice, meaning they knew what they published was false or had reckless disregard for its truth. Well, I don't think they're going to get that out of Candace. Listen to how she speaks. She's been on fire for the past week. Listen to this.
Oh, because of pressure, we have Attorney General Pam Bondi saying she's agreed to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell. Yeah, here's the headline coming out of NBC News. Deputy Attorney General will meet with Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. And she says, you know, if there's more to figure out here, we're going to see if we can get to the bottom of it. This is all fake, and you should not accept this. The moment that she should have just gone away and we could stop listening to Pam Bondi is the moment when she actually said that she was not sure whether or not Epstein could have been working for another country. Despite the fact that we have testimony in the form of Viktor Ostrovsky, who we covered. He defected from the Mossad, wrote a book, gave many speeches, speaking about exactly how he worked with Jeffrey Epstein, what his capacity was. Mossad has confirmed that Viktor Ostrovsky is not a fraud. He used to work for them, okay? So yeah, you got some evidence there. Also, Ari Ben-Menashe saying that, yeah, Epstein was brought to us. He was supposed to involve him in weapons dealing, the Iran-Contra affair. You know this, Pam Bondi, because the public knows this. So if you're playing stupid, it means that you are now a part of the swamp. You're part of the deep state. You are covering things up. And they're trying even more distractions, releasing the MLK files. Oh, we're going to now look into, here's everything. Here's a trove, tens of thousands of documents pertaining to the assassination of MLK, as if we don't already know that the feds shot him. Meant to be a distraction. I actually love that MLK's daughter, Bernice King, tweeted this. Check this out. Now do the Epstein files. No one is being distracted, you guys. We all recognize what exactly is happening, and it's a good thing. Stay focused on this because, like I said, this is the thread. This is the undoing. This is the...
Now, this is on her own show. I've got a clip coming up in a second where she's on Piers Morgan a couple of nights ago, and she unloads. So let's keep watching.
Everybody's going to wake up very quickly to the tapestry of deception that has been very carefully woven. The reason that America wants a regime change in Iran is because Bibi Netanyahu is demanding it. And we also are completely done with the idea that, with this decades-long idea that we're doing it to spread democracy because we believe in international liberalism. There was no imminent threat to the United States when Trump made this decision to do what Bibi wanted. And I want to be clear here. This was not Trump's decision. It was Bibi Netanyahu's decision. And that is the reason that he did it. And we're very aware that Israel is dictating our foreign policy, and we would now like that to stop.
Okay, but you wouldn't just disagree, presumably, that Iran has been the main sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East through the Houthis, through Hezbollah, through Hamas. I mean, that's widely accepted and recognized. They've done
it widely accepted. No, that's just kind of...
Really? You don't think they have?
Has been a terrorist state. Okay, Israel right now is imparting a genocide and a Holocaust on the Gazan people. So I'm really over this idea like somehow Israel has the moral high ground and we have to get behind them.
I didn't say that.
We've got to go after the bad guys. So it's rich to me that people are concerned about Iran having nukes. But I'm concerned about Israel, who won't even admit that they have nukes, having nukes, while at the same time they are executing a genocide and a Holocaust in Gaza that the world is watching. So who's the bigger terrorist is the question.
But when the leader of Iran says death to America, why doesn't that concern you?
Why are they chanting death to America? maybe has something to do with just like killing 1 million Iraqi civilians, okay, because Bibi Netanyahu on a congressional stage and said there are weapons of mass destruction, and we took that to the bank and there actually were no weapons of mass destruction, so we just killed 1 million. It could have something, I could be crazy, it could have something to do with our actions in the Middle East. We know that Bibi Netanyahu funded the Al-Qaeda adjacent front because he wanted to overthrow Syria. Right. Bibi Netanyahu funded Hamas. There is footage of Bibi Netanyahu saying this stuff on camera. So it's just so ridiculous to me to pretend that they're in some predicament, that they may be eradicated soon, which is why they have to keep funding all of these terrorist groups and then pretending that they're victims of terror, when in fact they are people that are imparting it worldwide. Okay? And again, these never-ending wars in the Middle East at the behest of Israel. Bibi Netanyahu is the one that called for Americans to invade Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, and now Iran, and we've done it. And we're done with the BS of, okay, well, they weren't really involved, Israel, in Afghanistan, because even when we fight those never-ending wars, Israel wins. Everybody knows that our boys were out there in Afghanistan guarding poppy fields, okay? And do you know what happened after we allegedly, quote unquote, lost in Afghanistan? What happened to all those poppy fields, those poppy flowers that our military was guarding? Well, the opioid crisis hit America via the Sackler family, who quite literally built the School of Medicine at Tel Aviv University. So we're just done, okay? And there's no way that we're going to go backwards. We're not going to allow you guys to emotionally condition us to go, oh, well, we got to protect Israel because of the Holocaust. It is over. They're imparting a Holocaust. America would like off this crazy train.
Wow. As a smart young lady. Now, there's people saying, oh, she's pro-Palestine. No, she totally understands what Hamas is. She understands what's going on over there. She understands what Israel is. And by the way, I should say that was for entertainment purposes only. She's pro-America. She is absolutely pro-U.S. and she wants the crazy train to stop, as she said. Now, remember when Pierre Poilievre, and this is why I go back to this, and now I guess in retrospect I can say this. When Pierre Poilievre was saying, we stand with Ukraine, we stand with Israel, all of that. He was saying that during the election campaign. He's always said that stuff. That means he's being controlled by somebody. So the upper levels, or many of the upper levels of the Conservative Party are controlled. The entire Liberal Party is controlled. The entire New Democrat Party is controlled. PPC, the party itself, the grassroots members, not controlled. Maxime Bernier, I believe, is controlled. What we're going to need is somebody like Grant Abraham of the United Party of Canada to step up and do something. And then, of course, we've got to get behind. Do what we can. Politics is not a spectator sport. Now, there's a lot of speculation about Donald Trump and the left calling for Donald Trump, release the Epstein files. You're in them. That's why you're not releasing. And so, of course, the White House administration comes out with a distraction. They released, Tulsi Gabbard does on Friday, she released all this new information, bombshell information regarding Barack Obama's involvement in the Russia hoax. And here she is talking about it today.
It goes into great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal acts like secret meetings with multiple named U.S. religious organizations in which State Department officials offered, in exchange for supporting Secretary Clinton's campaign for the presidency, significant increases in financing from the State Department. They also had documents that showed the patronage of the State Department to State Department employees who would go and support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level DNC emails that detailed evidence of Hillary's, quote, psycho-emotional problems, uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that then Secretary Clinton was allegedly on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers. Then CIA Director Brennan and the intelligence community mischaracterized intelligence and relied on dubious substandard sources to create a contrived false narrative that Putin developed a quote-unquote clear preference for Trump.
Yeah, okay, so that, in my opinion, is a distraction. And I think the Trump administration is going to go as far as they can with this distraction. maybe even go as far as arresting Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, or at least holding them to account in some way, shape, or form. Now, there's a bunch of comments going on in here that I see, and people are saying mind blown. I don't usually talk about this stuff on the main social media show. I usually save this kind of stuff for the extension on shadoedavis.com for the All Access Nighthawks. But I think it's time that you guys come in on this stuff. We've got all kinds of influencers on YouTube and other platforms talking about politics all the time. And yeah, that's a level of it, sure. I mean, they want us to think that we have a choice in the matter. They want us to think that we've got some say in what the hell's going on. But I think I said last night, and I repeated tonight, that there is no real conservative party in Canada, one that has any chance of winning any upcoming election. I mean, one would be better than the other, sure, but ultimately they're all going to go down that same road, just at a different pace. That's why I was saying vote conservative in the last election, so we'd have a little bit more runway, so we might be able to get our shit together and do something about this 2030 agenda. And again, I don't believe that Pierre Poilievre is a globalist, but I believe that he's doing their bidding for some reason. I can't tell you why. I don't think he's in the Epstein files, but there's some other reason for it. So if you want to hear and see more of this kind of content, then become an all-access member at shadoedavis.com. We do deep dives every single night. And the best thing is you don't have to stay up late to watch the extension. You can watch it tomorrow. You can watch it next week. It's all available on the website, shadoedavis.com, shadoedavis.com. And very soon, in the next couple of days, we're going to have the Shadoe Davis merch store up on the website as well. So you'll be able to buy hoodies and mugs and hats. And the ladies are asking me for tank tops. So I'm going to try and design some of those in the next couple of days and put them up on the website, in the store on the website. So go become a member. It would really help me to continue on with this show. I enjoy doing it. I love doing it. You guys are all here. I think you probably like the show. So help a guy out here. Help me stay on the air. Go and become an all-access member bi-monthly or yearly at shadoedavis.com, and we'll see you in the extension in just a second. Now, tonight on the extension, we're going to have a whistleblower talk about her experience when she was 13 years old with Jeffrey Epstein on Epstein Island and Donald J. Trump. Speaking of which, Stacey Williams is an ex of Jeffrey Epstein. She was on CNN the other night, because now the lefties are all over Trump about this. You'd think they would have been all over him about this years ago, but they weren't, because so many of their people are involved in the Epstein files, I'm sure, but now they are. Watch what Stacey Williams says here.
I know what they were up to together. It happened to me. I was polygraphed. I have the postcard with a love note. So I have the receipts. Where are Donald Trump's receipts? Where are they? I know what they're up together, and I know what that means. It's very clear. It wasn't baking or fishing. Michael Wolff has hundreds of hours of interviews with Jeffrey Epstein, where Jeffrey confirmed to Michael what the two of them did to me long before I came out and told you all of this.
Now, this is not the whistleblower we're going to be hearing from in the extension in just a couple of minutes. It's a completely different one. This woman, the one that we're going to hear from tonight in the extension, has her face blurred out. And you can be the judge as to whether or not she's telling the truth. Tomorrow night on the show, Ray McInnes, the author of Unjustified, is going to be joining the show. He's in Ottawa today, tomorrow, Friday, covering the sentencing hearing of Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. And I'm sure he'll be writing something about that very, very soon as well. We'll try and get Chris Carbert on the air as well in the next couple of nights. Who's going to be coming on next Tuesday night? We've got all kinds of guests lined up. John Carpay from JCCF is coming back in the next couple of weeks. I did have it written down, but I'm not sure where it is, you guys. I'm so sorry about that, but we do have some more great guests coming on in the coming days and weeks. So stay with the show. Don't forget, weeknights at 8 o'clock Central. I love you all, and I appreciate you all, and I'll catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central for another one. The extension begins on shadoedavis.com and in the Shadoe at Night community on Telegram in exactly 2 minutes.